Hi, I am Chet Shermer at Global MedOps Command and have been practicing emergency medicine for 25 years. I've encountered many bumps in those years, and what follows is an attempt to smooth some of them for everyone. There is a communication breakdown that happens every day in hospitals across this country, and it is not about information. It is about translation. Administrators and clinicians use the same words. They do not mean the same things by them. The result is a persistent dialogue of mutual frustration where each party feels unheard, misunderstood, and disrespected, and both parties are right. This brief maps three of the most common translation failures. The communication gap between clinicians and administrators is structural, not personal. Administrators are trained in operations, finance, regulatory compliance, and organizational behavior. Clinicians are trained in pathophysiology, diagnostics, and treatment. When they sit in the same room, they are speaking from fundamentally different mental models of what an emergency department is, what it does, and what success looks like. The physician sees a clinical system. The administrator sees an operational system. Both are correct. Neither model is complete. The language they share, efficiency, quality, performance, capacity, carries different operational definitions in each mental model. Proceeding without establishing those definitions produces the translation failures we're about to walk through. What administrators intend? The department needs to reduce bottlenecks in patient flow so that capacity is used effectively and more patients can receive timely care. What clinicians hear? We need to see patients faster, regardless of clinical complexity, discharge earlier, regardless of readiness, and prioritize volume over quality. The administrator is thinking about the department as a pipeline: input, throughput, output. The clinician is thinking about each patient as an individual clinical obligation that cannot be rushed without risk. Neither reading is wrong. The administrator's throughput concern is legitimate. The clinician's safety concern is legitimate. The failure is that neither party has articulated the legitimate constraint from the other frame. The resolution requires shared language. Our throughput data shows delays clustering in the diagnostic phase, specifically imaging turnaround times. Addressing radiology capacity doesn't require physicians to rush clinical decision-making. What administrators intend? Staffing levels should be calibrated to actual patient volumes, reducing excess capacity during low census periods to manage labor costs. What clinicians hear? We are going to cut staff. And when census spikes, we will be understaffed and patients will be at risk, and there will be no accountability for that outcome. Both interpretations are tracking real things. The administrator is tracking a real labor cost problem. The clinician is tracking a real safety risk from understaffing. The resolution requires variance data in the conversation. Right sizing based on average census without accounting for the 90th percentile surge creates documented safety risk. Here is the adverse event data correlated with low staffing ratios. The clinician who brings data to that conversation is no longer opposing the initiative. They are shaping it. What administrators intend? We should use objective operational metrics to evaluate department performance and identify improvement opportunities. What clinicians hear? My clinical judgment is being questioned and reduced to a spreadsheet, and the metrics being used do not capture what I actually do or the complexity of what I manage. Both readings have validity. Data-driven operations management is legitimate, and the quality of clinical work is genuinely resistant to full quantification. The resolution requires the clinician to engage with the data conversation rather than dismiss it. The physician who says, door to provider time doesn't capture case complexity, and then brings a risk-stratified outcome analysis to the next meeting is speaking the administrator's language while defending the clinical perspective. The communication gap is not closed by one party conceding to the other. It is closed by developing shared operational definitions and a shared framework for evaluating trade-offs. This requires physicians to invest in operational literacy, to understand how departments are measured, how decisions are made at the administrative level, and what levers actually produce change. It also requires administrators to invest in clinical literacy, to understand what emergency physicians are actually doing, what the constraints are, and where operational optimization creates clinical risk. Neither investment is optional if the goal is a functioning department. The physician who refuses to engage with operations and the administrator who refuses to engage with clinical reality are both failing the institution and its patients. Three things. First, build your translation dictionary. For each major metric or initiative in your department, understand both the administrative meaning and the clinical implication. Gaps between those two definitions are where conflicts live. Second, when you disagree with an administrative direction, frame the disagreement in the administrator's language before adding the clinical caveat. Lead with operational impact, follow with clinical risk. Third, recognize that most administrators are not opposed to clinical quality. They are optimizing for the system they can see with the tools they have. Your job is to expand what they can see. This is Global MedOps Command, Clinical Brief Series. The gap between what clinicians hear and what administrators intend is not a gap of bad faith. It is a gap of different frames. Your job is to become fluent in both. Next brief, why metrics improve PowerPoints but not patient flow. Stay prepared. Stay educated. Out.